When is the Milky Way season? If you've ever searched that phrase, you've probably gotten a dozen different answers. Some people say March to October. Some say April to September. Some say depends on where you live. Today, I'm going to help you find a clear answer for your location. I'll explain when the Milky Way core is visible, why it disappears for part of the year, what time of night to expect it in each month, and how it's different if you live in the southern hemisphere. When photographers say Milky Way season, we are usually talking about the visibility of the galactic core. The core is the bright, dense, detailed part of the Milky Way near the constellations Sagittarius and Scorpius. The core has the most structure, the brightest star clouds, the most color, and it looks most dramatic in photos. The Milky Way band itself is always in the sky somewhere, but the bright core is not. That's why there is a season. Why do we only see the core part of the year? This comes down to Earth's orbit around the Sun and our position in the galaxy. As Earth moves around the Sun over the course of a year, the nighttime side of our planet faces different directions into space. In winter, during the night or dark hours, we are facing away from the galactic center and towards the outer, dimmer regions of our galaxy. We do still face the galactic core from November to February. It's just during the daylight hours. So the core is still in the sky. We just can't see it because we are also facing the sun, and it's so bright that it overpowers any starlight. From roughly late February to November, we are facing towards the galactic center during at least some portion of the dark night hours. So the core is visible somewhere in our night sky. We will see later that when the core is visible and where it is still depends on where we are in this orbit. The basic structure of the galaxy doesn't change with the seasons. Our nighttime view simply changes throughout the year because of where we are in our orbit around the sun. The time of year when most of the Earth can see the Milky Way core is what we call Milky Way season. Now let's talk specifically first about the northern hemisphere. Basically everything north of the equator to around 55 degrees north latitude. For the northern hemisphere, we say that Milky Way core season is roughly late February or early March through October or early November. The last or first possible week you can see the Milky Way core will change slightly from year to year. Not because our orbit is changing, but because of the moon cycle. For example, sometimes the full moon happens at the end of February, which would mean that while the core will be in the night sky before sunrise, you won't be able to see it because the full moon will wash it out. The moon cycle is the main reason that I can't say you will absolutely be able to see the Milky Way on a certain date. You will find in this journey that the moon is your constant and sometimes unwanted companion. The time of night the Milky Way is visible also changes. The reason for this comes back to our orbit around the sun and when we are facing the galactic core. Don't worry though, because this also follows a general pattern. While exact rise and set times can vary depending on where you live, I can give you some general rules to help you plan. These rules are for the northern hemisphere. Again, this is for mid-latitudes. That is from roughly 30 to 45 degrees. To help you visualize, those are roughly the latitudes of the borders of the United States. For those of you below that line, you will see the Milky Way rise earlier. And for those of you above that line, you will see the Milky Way rise a little later or not at all. So let's talk about it month by month. In February, the core begins rising just before sunrise local time. You will have a very short viewing window, and the Milky Way will be very low on the horizon. This is early season and requires early mornings. Now, you may have seen Milky Way core images taken in late January. This is possible some years, especially if the new moon is at the end of the month or you live near the equator or in the southern hemisphere. But because these windows are very short and the Milky Way core is barely visible, we typically do not consider January Milky Way core season. Some people say February is pushing it too early, but for some years you can get a significant window to photograph, so I will include it here. In the start of March, the core rises around 3 to 4 a.m. and is visible until twilight. Then it continues to rise earlier each morning, giving you more time to photograph. In April, the core rises around 1 to 2 a.m. April is a great time for Milky Way panoramas. In May, the core rises before midnight and is visible until the twilight hours. This is when the Milky Way season starts feeling more practical. May is still great for panoramas and time lapses of the Milky Way moving from the eastern to southern skies. Prepare for beautiful and long nights in May if you don't want to miss a minute. Next, June. The core rises shortly after sunset and stays up until twilight. This is the peak season for many photographers. June is also when a lot of people will start to see the Milky Way core while casually observing the sky from areas without light pollution. In July, the core is already up at sunset, so you won't get any rising pictures and single row panoramas become tricky. They're still possible in early July if you work quickly, right as the night falls, but you will need a wide lens and an efficient workflow. It's best to capture all your panoramas earlier in the year. The Milky Way core is high in the southern sky during most of the night, and you will even get to see the Milky Way core dip below the horizon. August is an excellent month for Milky Way viewing. The sun is setting earlier, so the Milky Way visibility also moves to an earlier hour. Typically, it is visible around 9 to 10 p.m. during August. However, this also means the Milky Way will be setting earlier as the month progresses. If you really don't want to lose much sleep, September might be your month to view the Milky Way. The core is still visible after nightfall, but the sun sets earlier than in August, so Milky Way visibility times are around 8 to 9 p.m. The core also sets earlier, meaning that diehards like me run out of things to take pictures of by midnight and have to go to sleep. Of course, there are always star trails. Now, October and November are when things get tricky. The Milky Way is visible earlier as the sun is setting earlier, but it is setting earlier as well. So you will have a very brief window after nightfall. It's still possible to capture the core, but you will have a shorter and shorter window. At some point in November, the visibility window closes and the galactic center is no longer visible at night. Now, let's talk about the southern hemisphere. Their Milky Way season is similar to ours. It's just a little longer, and here is why. In the southern hemisphere, the Milky Way core appears much higher in the sky. It can even pass nearly overhead in some locations. This means that people in the south can see the core earlier in the year and that it rises at an earlier time than on the same night in the northern hemisphere. Because it's higher in the sky, the galactic center looks brighter and more dramatic. They can also see more of the region below the core. The further south you get, the higher it climbs in the sky. This can make compositions tricky since the Milky Way core is not as near the horizon, which is why many southern hemisphere photographers opt to capture panoramas to show the core in all of its glory. So now we know that Milky Way season depends on Earth's orbit around the sun, your latitude, and the month of the year. The Milky Way band is always out there, but the bright galactic core only becomes visible at night during certain months because of how our planet moves through space. If you understand that, you can plan ahead instead of guessing. Now, a word of warning. Just because the Milky Way is in the sky most of the night in June doesn't mean you will see it every night in June. To determine if the core is visible or not depends on the moon. This applies to all months of the season. Full or nearly full moons will wash out the core, so you can't see or photograph it. So when planning your images, pay attention to the moon cycle as well. It's a lot to remember, so if you want a simple checklist with all the settings and steps to capture your own night sky photos, download my free Milky Way Quick Start Guide from the link in the description. If you want to see my full planning workflow, check out my Milky Way Emotion course, where I walk you through every step. Thanks for joining me. Please subscribe and check out other videos here. YouTube thinks you will enjoy it. Until next time, take care and clear skies.